Chapter 181, Ariartel 6. Eugene was dizzy and nauseous. Hearing two voices at the same time made his already dizzy head ache. Sir Eugene, Sir Eugene. Mare made a fuss as she grabbed Eugene's shoulders. Wondering how long had passed, Eugene raised his head as he wiped the blood tears running down his cheeks. According to the clock on the wall, a little over 10 minutes had passed since he had begun to resonate with the moonlight sword. Eugene felt like he had been watching the darkness projected inside his head for a very long moment, but only 10 minutes had passed. How long are you going to keep shaking me? Eugene asked, groaning. Are you sure you're okay? Mare's voice croaked. I'm fine. Yeah, I think I'm fine, Eugene answered and got down from the bed. However, his legs gave in for a moment and he almost collapsed, making Mare look like she would start to cry. She climbed down the bed and tried her hardest to help Eugene, even though he was way bigger than her. That was why I warned you. Tempest yelled inside Eugene's head. This isn't the first time I ignored a warning and got my ass handed to me, right? Eugene shrugged. Hamel. Tempest gritted his teeth. Alright, I'm sorry. I should have been more careful and checked beforehand. Eugene raised his arms. First he took a look at Akasha because he was worried that the draconic spells had been broken due to the incident just now. But Akasha was luckily intact, as was the moonlight sword. The bladeless sword was still emitting pale moonlight. Well, the sword was emitting light outward, but it projected a pitch-black darkness in Eugene's head. The night after sunset shadow Inc. Eugene could think of many dark things, but the darkness he had just seen was the darkest and the most ominous of them all. There was also the rattling sound of iron chains and the pair of red eyes that had opened in the center of the darkness. Eyes belonging to the Demon King of Incarceration, whom Eugene could never forget, even though he had only met the Demon King once. Why would he? Eugene wondered. Don't look. The words the Demon King of Incarceration had just whispered ran through Eugene's head. Was the Demon King related to the moonlight sword? No. His appearance in Eugene's vision was due to the Demon King's own interference. It had nothing to do with Akasha's new detection spell. When the Demon King told him not to look, was he talking about the darkness? Why? So, the Demon King of Incarceration is definitely related to Vermouth's disappearance. Eugene nodded. He had no intention of being surprised or getting angry now. Even though Sienna had gotten a hole in her chest and had almost died because of that son of bitch, she had told Eugene that Vermouth had his own reasons as his former comrade and friend. The oath itself was evidence that Vermouth and the Demon King of Incarceration had done something together. The Demon King of Incarceration could have killed everyone who arrived before him. No, the Demon Kings could have destroyed the continent. The only reason why a war had taken place instead of a one-sided massacre 300 years ago was that the Demon King of Incarceration and the other Demon Kings hadn't left Helmuth. Although they controlled demonic beasts, demon folks and dark wizards, the Demon Kings never left Helmuth. If the Demon Kings themselves had fought in the war or if even two Demon Kings joined forces, it would have been impossible for the hero party to kill one Demon King, let alone three. Is the Demon King of Incarceration holding Vermouth captive? Eugene wondered. It wasn't the first time Eugene thought of this. In fact, he had thought about Vermouth multiple times. Why had he taken so many wives and had so many children? Why had he almost killed Sienna, signed a peace treaty with the Demon King and made Hamel reincarnate? The Vermouth that Eugene remembered hadn't really expressed what was on his mind. Eugene had felt this when he had first met Vermouth in his past life. He really couldn't tell what Vermouth was thinking about. And what do you intend to do in Helmuth? We're going to kill the Demon Kings. Vermouth had said so. First we're going to kill the Demon King of Carnage. Then we'll kill the Demon King of Cruelty, and after that we'll kill the Demon King of Fury. Once we've killed the Demon King of Incarceration, all that's left is to kill the Demon King of Destruction. Vermouth had reached out his hand as he had spoken, and Hamel had never thought that Vermouth was lying. It didn't only apply to Hamel. Whether Sienna, Anise or Molin, everyone believed Vermouth's resolve and had the same resolve as him. Their countries, their genders, their backgrounds and their abilities were all different, but they all had a twisted side. Rather than following someone's lead, they would all have worked alone or become a leader themselves. The only reason why these 5 people could form a group was that they had Vermouth as their leader. Since Vermouth had said that they would kill the Demon Kings, the 5 had wandered Helmuth without doubting him one bit as they killed the Demon King of Carnage, Demon King of Cruelty and Demon King of Fury. But you signed the treaty because you had to, Eugene thought as he looked at his reflection in the mirror. He did stop shedding blood tears, but there were still traces of blood on his cheeks. I just didn't want to let you go ahead of me, Hamel. Were you satisfied with your death? If you really were, then you're a son of a bitch. What gives you the right to go and get yourself killed out of self-satisfaction? We couldn't just accept your death, and we didn't want to let your soul go to its final resting place ahead of us. But Hamel, you shouldn't blame Vermouth. Eugene thought of Sienna. Hamel. Why should Vermouth have abandoned his comrades? He didn't want you to die. He also didn't want to see Sienna, Anise or Molen die either. That's why, when everyone else was defeated, Vermouth held back from delivering the killing blow with the Moonlight Sword. In that moment, the Demon King of Incarceration would still have been able to kill everyone except for Vermouth. However, that didn't happen because the Demon King of Incarceration instead was forced to make a promise with Vermouth. That promise wasn't made for the sake of the world. It was to save the comrades who had stayed together with him until that final moment, and to reclaim your soul, which should by all rights have been annihilated. Eugene thought of Tempest. Thank you. Thank you all, for coming with me without dying. Eugene thought of Vermouth, who had pulled out the holy sword from the Demon King's corpse with his back against the daybreak light. I would rather. Heaving a long sigh, Eugene wiped the stains on his cheeks. I would prefer the hypothesis of how Vermouth made a promise that he couldn't avoid, arranged my reincarnation, and got captured alive by the Demon King of Incarceration. Tempest stayed silent. I know how absurd and ridiculous my thoughts are. The Demon King isn't an idiot, so why would he just hold Vermouth hostage, not kill him? And why would he let me, someone who reincarnated to kill the Demon Kings, live? Eugene rubbed his eyes. The Demon King made a promise. For what? I don't know. I don't really see why. Why would the Demon King of Incarceration stop me from seeing Vermouth's memories on Vermouth's behalf? I don't know. Eugene covered his face with his hands. What would have happened if Eugene had kept staring into the darkness? Eugene looked down at the moonlight sword that was still in his hand. The destruction in the shape of a sword emitted pale moonlight, which was beautiful yet ominous. What was the darkness that Akasha had gotten from the moonlight sword and projected inside Eugene's head? Was Vermouth beyond the darkness? The voice said, "Don't look." As if. Eugene bit his lips. Because of the Demon King of Incarceration's interference, Eugene had been able to stop staring at the darkness. If the Demon King hadn't interfered, how long would Eugene have stared at the darkness? No, would he have just looked into it? Fuck, Eugene muttered. When Eugene had met Amelia Merwin at the desert dungeon, he had been unable to beat her. He knew that he would not have been able to escape from Amelia in the deep desert underground dungeon even if he had used ignition and the moonlight sword. Yet, the Demon King of Incarceration had also interfered at the time. He had descended and made Amelia Merwin stand down. There is nothing beyond. Nothing has happened here, Eugene thought as he returned to his bed, biting his lips. When he collapsed on the bed, he could feel Mare, who had been sitting in the corner, furtively approaching. Putting a steam towel on top of Eugene's cheeks, Mare carefully wiped the faint blood stains and the blood clots in the corner of his eyes. After that, Tempest's warm wind dried Eugene's wet face. Without talking to Eugene any further, they quietly stayed beside Eugene. Thanks, Eugene quietly spoke. Shall we sleep together today? I'll hold your hand. Mare offered. You can't sleep anyway, Eugene pointed out. But I can stay by your side until you wake up. Mare shrugged. Aren't you just scared to stay in the cloak alone? Eugene faintly grinned. No way, I'm not scared of anything. Well, not exactly anything. I'm scared about something happening to the people who are nice to me, like Lady Sienna, you and Lady Ancilla. Mare quietly murmured as she tucked Eugene and crawled into the comforter to lie beside him as if it was the most natural thing. So don't get mad or be sad, Sir Eugene. Don't do something dangerous too much or get hurt. Stay healthy until Lady Sienna returns. I'm fine, Eugene assured Mare. You're lying. I saw you shedding blood tears and felt a part of your emotions. Mare pouted, remembering Eugene's pain, desperateness, loneliness, and anger that she had sensed. Mare didn't know what would happen to Eugene if he had to endure the burden of all these emotions at the same time, so she couldn't just leave him alone. I can sing you a lullaby. Get lost, Tempest. Eugene growled. He was sure that he would have a horrible nightmare if he listened to the lullaby sung with Tempest's husky voice. Hamel, Anise said. Eugene wasn't sure when this had happened. How could he know for sure? Although he had fought rather often even before he had gotten to Helmuth, once his group had reached the Demon King country, fights had come their way more often than meals. Enemies hadn't cared about what time it was and used whatever methods they could think of to attack the hero party. The time in the horrible hell quickly made the hero party stronger, but the party's fights didn't get any easier. As they got stronger, the number of strong enemies increased. The hero party was able to fight through endless battles because 3 people out of the 5 party members could use healing magic. However, the healing spells that the 3 used were different from one another. Although Vermouth's healing magic was very effective on himself, he couldn't cure other people. Healing magic could only be used by a devout priest in the first place, so Vermouth's healing magic was more like a hero's blessing of sorts. Sienna couldn't use actual holy magic either, but she knew how to use elven healing magic, having grown up in an elven village ever since she was a baby. Since Sienna was a very talented wizard to begin with, her healing magic was as strong as most high-ranking clerics, but it could not hold a candle to Anise, the faithful Anise, the Saint of Light. "Are you okay?" Hamel asked. The healing magic cast by Anise Slywood was too extraordinary to be called a mere magic spell. No, her magic was quite literally a miracle. When Anise reconnected amputated limbs to their owner, she didn't only connect the flesh, but she connected everything from bones and muscle to nerves and veins. Therefore, whoever was treated with Anise's magic did not suffer from aftereffects, and neither did they have to go through rehabilitation. When Anise cast her healing spells, the lame walked, the lepers were cleansed, and the blind regained sight. Even if every bone in a person's body was shattered, their intestines were torn out, or the heart ruptured, Anise's miracles cured any wounds in a flash. She could fix absolutely anything unless the person was well and truly dead. The only people that she failed to help were the dead, and Hamel, whose very soul was dissipating due to the curse of the lich, Belial. "I'm not fine," Anise answered. Eugene wasn't sure on which battlefield Anise had said that. Was it after they had killed the Demon King of Carnage? Was it after they had killed the Demon King of Cruelty or the Demon King of Fury? When they had been fighting against Kamash and the giants? While they had been avoiding Ryzakia's bombing? When they had been fighting against the suicidal vampires? The demon folk army led by the Incarceration's Blade? He had no idea because he had fought too many battles 300 years ago. In fact, he could count on his fingers the number of times he had ended a fight unscarred. Hamel had always been busy treating his wounds after battles. No, he had even treated his injuries during battles. People had died every day on the battlefields 300 years ago, so of course, there had also been many wounded. Many people who had lost someone to monsters, demonic beasts, or demon folks had struggled on those battlefields out of hatred and desire for vengeance rather than whatever fancy belief about saving the world. Those people were terribly weak, yet they went from battlefield to cool their anger and seek vengeance. Although they wanted to give their everything to achieve those goals on the battlefields, they subconsciously knew that they could never do so, so they just hoped they could die fighting. Anise, the saint, had never been able to sit by and watch them die. Despite Anise's normal unsaintly self, she was more devout and saint-like than anyone else when she had to. When the hero party arrived before the Demon King of Incarceration's castle, all 5 members were alive and able to fight. They had encountered several crises that had almost rendered them incapable of fighting, but only unerasable scars had been left on their bodies. For years they had fought battles every day, but they were still in peak shape thanks to Anise's miracles. "You overtaxed yourself," Hamel murmured, looking at Anise. On the battlefield they could smell the blood, and the scent of rotting and burning corpses. I know you're so damn stubborn that you would never listen to anyone," Hamel said. "I don't want to hear that from someone like you," Anise grumbled. "Why? Is it because I'm also a stubborn bastard who never listens?" "Well, you're right. But unlike you, I choose who to save," Anise. Hamel shrugged. Anise didn't answer. Instead, she unbuttoned her priest robe, so Hamel sighed and approached Anise. "They're begging to be killed because they really want to die. Letting them die will be their salvation rather than healing them, so why are you taking all this suffering upon yourself by going through the trouble of saving them?" Hamel asked. "Why would a cleric need a reason to save someone?" Anise answered without turning back to Hamel. "The fact that they don't want to be saved is none of my business. I just save them because I can save them. Not saving them when I can would mean that I'm turning a blind eye to everything. One by one, she unbuttoned the rest of the buttons on her robe as she continued. I can't, no, I won't do that. You asked why I suffer losses, right? No, I'm not suffering losses, Hamel. I do many good deeds by saving many people so I can go to heaven. Her priest robe dropped down to the floor. Of course, I already did enough good deeds to go to heaven. Since God must be watching my good deeds, he'll bestow with light as bright as the number of my good deeds, Anise calmly explained. When a person died, the good deeds they had done before they had died became light, and their bad deeds became darkness. If their light was bright enough to outshine the darkness, then the person could go to heaven where there was no darkness. All the sins in this world were created in the darkness, where there was no light, and since there was no darkness in the heaven ruled by the God of light, there was no sin. Therefore no one suffered. This was the story that the citizens of the Uruz Empire believed in. God doesn't bleed on behalf of young sheep. Although God is a bright enough light to outshine all the darkness, he isn't lighting up the darkness that is now trying to swallow up the world. Anise's long hair was the only thing covering her bare back. She lifted it up as she continued to speak in a bitter tone. I'm the saint of light, and as God's saint, I have to outshine the darkness in this world if he isn't doing so. I should shed holy blood and brighten up the darkness with my light on his behalf, Hamel. I think that not everyone who has died after living in this horrible era can go to heaven. Anise's back was bloody. Because he had seen it multiple times, Hamel had been used to it already. Whenever Anise used too much of her divine power or performed great miracles too many times, Anise's back always turned bloody. Every time it happened she called Hamel, but he was sure that she hadn't planned to do that in the beginning. There had once been a time a long time ago when Vermouth, Sienna and Molin had gone off to take care of nearby remnants of the demonic forces after they had finished a battle. But Hamel and Anise had stayed behind because he had been too injured and she had been too tired. Instead of asking the already tired Anise to use her healing magic on him, Hamel had tried to give himself first aid, but while he had been taking care of his injury, Anise had fainted. I'll become the second brightest light next to the God I serve. Anise handed Hamel a wet towel. Holding the wet towel, Hamel carefully wiped Anise's bloody back. So I'll also light the people's darkness who couldn't go to heaven. Not all the people who have died in this generation will be able to go to heaven, but I'll guide as many people as possible there. When Hamel wiped the blood, her wounds were revealed. No, not wounds, but divine writing carved into her entire back. Any time Anise performed a great miracle, the divine writing dug deeper into her skin, making her bleed. The writing was thus growing bigger little by little. The first time Hamel had seen Anise's back, the divine letters had only been carved near her shoulders, but every time she performed a miracle, the divine writing became longer and wider. The divine writing that Hamel could see now had already reached her waist. It's interesting how you can't cure your own back when you can use all sorts of miracles. That's my stigmata, which in and of itself is a miracle, so wouldn't it be absurd to treat a miracle with another miracle? Putting the holy water bottle on her waist to her lips, Anise sat down so Hamel could wipe out the blood more easily. Hamel usually aimed for Anise's holy water, but not in times like these, because he had found out why Anise was drinking the holy water non-stop. Tell me if it hurts. It doesn't. Anise laughed and drank the holy water like usual. Since she was good at hiding her feelings and thoughts, she always said something totally different from what she was thinking, and she always smiled no matter how grievous her pain. After wiping up all the blood, Hamel applied ointment on her deeply carved tattoos. Since her so-called stigmata couldn't even be cured by a miracle, the ointment obviously couldn't cure the wounds, but they bled less if Hamel applied it. I'm glad you're the one who found out about my stigmata, Anise mumbled as she put down her holy water. I don't want to show this to Vermouth, and Molin would start fighting passively, giving up his strength. As for Sienna, she'd physically restrain me to stop me from doing anything dangerous. What about me? You try to understand me. Anise chuckled. Although you say, don't do anything dangerous, you understand why I'm being stubborn, so you don't stop me. You know that the more violently you fight, the more I bleed, but you always fight in the same way. That will be better for you. When Hamel finished wiping up the blood and applying the ointment, he wrapped Anise's wound in bandages. You won't listen no matter what I'll say, but battles will become longer if I fight passively. Then finishing the battles quickly will bring us less damage overall, even if it's dangerous. Hee hee, and you're skilled at treating injuries. You wrap the bandages really well so I don't feel uncomfortable and you don't feel any physical lust when you see my naked back. Hamel frowned. What kind of bastard would feel lust while looking at someone's bloody, scarred back? I appreciate how you consider a fellow comrade like a comrade instead of a woman, but why don't you think about other matters for a change? Anise giggled. About what? Well, you know how I might be painfully bleeding because of you. Anise's tone was playful. I told you it's better to fight aggressively than passively. Anise burst into laughter at Hamel's remark. Don't we have Molen for that? Hamel, the amount of blood I shed would have halved if you and Molen got less injured. Unable to say anything, Hamel just finished wrapping the bandages. I'll try. Recalling this conversation from a long time ago, Eugene thought of Anise, whom he had last seen with 8 sets of wings. There are fewer wings. Eugene observed Anise's divine statue in Eurasia, the Holy Empire's capital. A statue that was sporting only 1 set of wings. Chapter 182, Eurasia 1. The sacred empire of Eurus had a long and storied history. After passing through the warp gate that stood at the south of Eurasia, the capital city of the empire, one would emerge in the Plaza of the Sun, which had been praised as the most beautiful and sacred place in Eurus. This square held all the statues of the saints who had been revered in Eurus throughout the ages. The 13th of April happened to be one of Eurus' anniversaries. Anise's birthday, Eugene recalled. In Eurus, the faithful Anise was considered their most famous saint, her fame exceeding even that of the founder of Eurus, the incarnation of light. This was because the people of Eurus felt much closer to the saintess, who was said to have slain 3 demon kings alongside the hero the Great Vermouth, 300 years ago than they did to the incarnation who founded Eurus so long ago. Perhaps that was why followers of the light gathered to Eurus from all over the continent on the 13th of April. The same went for this year as well. Although there were still a few days left until Anise's birthday, the Warp Gate and the Plaza of the Sun were already packed with followers of the Church of Light. Mingled in with the crowd, Eugene looked up at Anise's statue. It was located in the center of the Plaza of the Sun. The statue of Anise was floating in the sky with a pair of outspread wings. It was a truly grand statue made up of various magical minerals, gold and jewels. The different bright shades of the materials shone even more in the sunlight, and in the dark of the night when the sun went down, the statue would emit its own light in order to light up the plaza. In this plaza, Anise's statue was the only one that had been made with such effort and cost that it could even float in the sky like this. While the statue floated in the sky, the visitors who came every day could only look up to see it from far below. But on Anise's birthday, the 13th of April each year, her statue would descend to the ground, giving the believers a chance to get a closer look. Eugene stared up at Anise's statue for quite a long time. In his previous life, he had never visited the Holy Empire. When he first became a member of the party in his past life, Vermouth had already become the master of the Holy Sword, and the saint, Anise, was already at his side. So there was no reason for them to go back. I also haven't heard that much about it, Eugene thought. Anise, who was from Eurus, didn't say much about the place where she had been born and raised. Whenever one of them would start talking about their hometown, Anise would just observe from a distance and had never once participated directly in such a discussion. Even a tactless fool like Molen knew that Anise didn't have any fond feelings for her hometown. Eugene was also aware that Anise's feelings towards the Holy Empire had been closer to hatred. He just didn't know the reasons for this. The outstretched wings on the back of Anise's statue were beautiful. The wings had been made out of stained glass. Hundreds and thousands of differently colored glass feathers had been overlaid to form these wings. And whenever the sunlight shone down at them from the skies high above, rays of colored light would scatter out from inside of those winds. "It's so beautiful," Mare muttered, looking up at Anise with dazed eyes from Eugene's side. It was just as Mare said. Among all the statues in this plaza, Anise's was outstandingly beautiful. Seeing it float in the sky with rays of light pouring out from its wings, it felt like even someone without any belief in the god of light might start having faith. This statue was one of Eura's most resplendent and beautiful tools of propaganda. "Is this what you wanted?" Eugene muttered. "Huh." Mare tilted her head in question as she heard Eugene's murmur. Instead of responding, Eugene recalled a conversation that he had had with Anise. Anise had wanted to become a shining light of faith by continuously accumulating good deeds. By doing so, she hoped to become a son that would be able to lead all those who had lived and died in that era toward heaven. Eugene wasn't sure if Anise had really been able to become that sort of light after she died, but she had become an angel. She had gotten her just rewards for continuously performing miracles without taking care of her own body, resurrecting people who just wanted to die over and over again. Anise had also left a beautiful statue of herself on this earth, which had served in converting countless non-believers to devout followers of the Church of Light. But it feels like you wouldn't like that statue very much, Eugene silently said to Anise. At this point it was still hard to tell what Anise had thought of Uraz. With a wry smile, Eugene turned around. He hadn't come to this country to celebrate Anise's birthday or participate in Eurasia's festivities. Though it might be another question if this were the anniversary of her death, Eugene considered thoughtfully. If that had been the case, he would be more than willing to participate in the events. Even if it was for the sake of the memories from his past life, he'd feel obliged to have a drink for himself, pour one out for her, and even shed a few tears depending on what events from their past he could recall. The Holy Sword had shown him a memory of what had happened back then in that grave at the bottom of the desert. Sienna, Anise, and Molin had all shed tears over Hamel's death. The only one whose tears hadn't spilled in that grave was Vermouth. Eugene sighed. Since you cried for me, I should be able to cry for you as well. Birthday? What about it? It wasn't like they hadn't celebrated each other's birthdays before, but it had been 300 years since. It would be funny to be celebrating it now. These were Eugene's thoughts as he started walking towards the plaza exit. But he wasn't able to keep walking for very long, because he met the gaze of someone standing a little ways away from him. Her blue eyes drew a shallow curve beneath the deep shadows of her hooded robe. Eugene let out a sigh as he walked over to the woman dressed in these robes. It appeared that she had no intention of holding a conversation here as she turned around and moved to leave. Eugene leisurely followed behind the woman without being in a hurry to chase after her. "Were you intoxicated by the statue's beauty?" the woman suddenly asked. Once they had left the plaza, the crowd noticeably thinned. Only after they had come this far, the young woman slowed her steps, allowing Eugene to approach her side. "It was a bit too sparkly for my tastes," Eugene critiqued. "Isn't it a bit too extravagant?" The faithful Lady Anise wanted to illuminate the darkness for all eternity. "That statue stands as the embodiment of Lady Anise's wish," Christina Rogerus replied to Eugene without lifting her deeply drawn hood. The reason for the concealment was understandable. Anise's birthday anniversary was just around the corner. The believers who had gathered in the vicinity of the plaza were all people who had come here to take part in the festivities and offer up their worship. Statues of Anise hadn't just been erected in the Plaza of the Sun, there were more all over Uraz. Since there was no way that the believers who had come here to celebrate Anise's feast day wouldn't recognize her appearance if they were to see Christina, who so resembled Anise, well, it wouldn't be strange for a few of the more older and fragile followers to faint on the spot. "How long has it been? Aren't you going to say that it's nice to see me again?" Eugene teased. Lifting her head at these joking words, Christina stared unwaveringly at Eugene for a few moments before nodding slightly and saying, "It's been a long time, Sir Eugene. I feel it's quite a blessing to meet you in such an unharmed state." Eugene attempted to bluff. "Unharmed state? And what does that mean? When have I ever been?" "I've heard all about what happened at the Black Lion Castle," Christina interjected as she drew closer to him. She looked up at Eugene, who was taller than herself, and her eyes softened gently as she said, "I've heard quite a huge incident occurred. I'm not an expert on those sorts of things, so I wasn't called to go to the Black Lion Castle, but I was able to hear in detail what transpired there through Inquisitors Adarix and Himoria." "Well, what else can I say?" Eugene hesitated. "I'm not sure what they told you, but, it was quite a huge incident, but I came out of it unharmed without a single scratch." Christina interrupted again. "I've heard that your body hadn't fully recovered even after a few days of bed rest." Eugene fumbled for a response. There's no way the Black Lion caste would be lacking in healing potions. If you had just requested it, then I, as the saint, would have come looking for you personally to tend to your wounds. However, there was no such request," Christina said accusingly. "Shouldn't you also be aware that healing potions aren't all-powerful?" Eugene tried to argue. "Even an elixir has its limits. Also, it wasn't like I was injured enough to need a priest." You were bedridden for several days, Christina pointed out. So what? Did you happen to use that? The name? You called it ignition, didn't you? That's basically a suicide method that destroys both your body and your heart while carving away at your lifespan. I think calling it a suicidal method might be a little harsh. It isn't. What's harsh is how you, Sir Eugene, abuse your body with such reckless techniques. While staring at Eugene through her narrowed eyes, Christina continued speaking. I should have already warned you about that technique back in Samar. That technique requires you to lie down for several days after using it just once, and while you're lying down like that, it would be difficult for you to control your body, so you would need someone to help you. Her voice was gentle, yet it also had a sharp and piercing quality. Eugene didn't really want to recall what had happened in Samar. It felt good to have been able to use ignition to kill Barong, but he had shown such an ugly scene during his first time suffering from the recoil of that technique since his reincarnation. Eugene hadn't even been able to walk on his own feet and was forced to allow himself to be carried on Christina's back. Then for the next 3 days he had been forced to eat the food that Christina scooped up for him and drink the water that she trickled into his mouth. It's not like she had done anything to despise him. In fact, she had behaved so respectfully that he had felt like she was going overboard. But for some reason it felt like his pride as a person was being undercut. It's all right if I'm at your side. If it was me at that time, I would have been able to respond quickly to your injuries, and I'm familiar with how to take care of your worn-out body. However, it was far too reckless to use such a technique when I wasn't with you, Christina complained. Well, Eugene hesitated. I was left with no choice but to do so. I didn't really want to use it either. I also heard that you fought with the Rakshasa princess in Kiel. When I heard that news, do you know what kind of thoughts went through my head? Christina asked. How would I know that? Eugene replied. I regretted the fact that I couldn't be there with you. As the saint, if I had been there with you, I might have been able to help you deliver justice to that evil leader of the Dark Elves. Let's not talk about something that's already in the past. Christina's steps came to an abrupt halt. While wondering what she wanted, Eugene also came to a stop and turned to look at Christina. At that moment, her hands reached over to grab Eugene's own. Sir Eugene, Christina said as she grabbed Eugene's hands and held them together. She noticed the ring on the ring finger of Eugene's left hand but chose not to say anything about that for now, instead saying, Please recognize what a special existence you are. You are a hero who has been acknowledged by the Holy Sword. As the saint, I am ready to die for you, Sir Eugene. If you were to be injured, I would do everything in my power to perform a miracle to heal you. Eugene listened to this silently. As the hero, you need to fulfill your duties. In this world, the only duty that a hero absolutely needs to accomplish is to slay the remaining 2 demon kings. As such, please. Is something wrong? Eugene glanced down at Christina's hands. They weren't shaking and there wasn't any sweat either. Even the pulse he could subtly sense through their joined hands was calm. However, for some reason Eugene felt a strange sense of foreboding. Perhaps it was due to the smile that Christina was currently wearing. Eugene wasn't unfamiliar with that sort of smile. He had seen it once before. That's right, it was back when he had first met Christina, right before they entered Vermouth's tomb. When he had mentioned Christina's resemblance to a niece and had asked about her birth parents. Christina had worn the same sort of smile at that moment. Even though it looked peaceful, the feelings behind it certainly weren't. It was a smile that seemed to have been cultivated with great care over a long time so that she could activate it almost unconsciously and not look like a facade even though it was. At first glance, that smile just seemed to be benevolent and befitting her title as the saint. If this had been Eugene's first time meeting Christina, and his relationship with her had still been shallow, then he wouldn't have felt any discomfort from that smile. However, Eugene had spent several months with Christina within Samar. Together they had made it into the elven domain that no one had visited in centuries, and Christina had even been able to calmly face the risk of death with him when they met Barong. It had only been a few months. However, if he added the years from his previous life on top of that, it didn't feel that short. That was how much Christina resembled a niece. If you examined each of their features separately, one by one, they might not be exactly alike, but it wouldn't be much of an exaggeration to say that they appeared to be twins judging from the air they both gave off. As such, Eugene couldn't read her. Christina had also given that sort of smile right before they parted ways at the Lionheart mansion. When they had first met, that smile had seemed artificial and pretentious, but after experiencing several crises in Samar, her true feelings had started to slowly emerge. "What are you talking about?" came Christina's late reply. After blinking her eyes a few times, Christina tilted her head to the side and changed her expression. Her smile faded away and her expression grew doubtful. "You had a strange look on your face," Eugene explained. "Are you saying that my face looks strange?" Christina asked. Eugene replied honestly, "It feels like you're forcing yourself to laugh." "That's not the case, but if you truly feel that way, it may be because I've been laughing more forcefully than I realized. It's been several months since I last met you like this, so it may be that my expression is a bit awkward," Christina claimed as she let go of Eugene's hands. Then she immediately diverted her gaze and looked at Mare, who was blinking up at her from Eugene's side now. "Well now, to think that this small little girl is the familiar that the wise Lady Sienna created personally. My name is Mare Meridian," Mare introduced herself. So Christina was finally paying attention to her. Although Mare had met many different people over the years, Mare felt a certain feeling for the first time upon meeting Christina, something that felt indescribable and unpleasant. "It's nice to meet you, Miss Familiar." Would it be rude of me to call you that?" Christina said hesitantly. "No, I'm fine with that. Although I may have been made over 200 years ago, it's true that I am a cute and adorable little girl who looks exactly like Lady Sienna," Mare declared proudly. It was impressive that Mare could say something like that with her own mouth. As Eugene thought this, he stared down at the crown of Mare's head. In fact, Eugene had also said some things about his previous life as Hamel, like that his face wasn't bad and that he had had the charm of an untamed wild stallion, but that was before he had revealed himself to be Hamel. And it wasn't like he had spitted out such shameless and daring things about his own current face. Fufu, that really does seem to be the case. I've also seen Lady Sienna's portrait and statue before, but it seems that Miss Mare really was made in Lady Sienna's exact image," Christina said with a faint smile as she stared into Mare's eyes. Mare didn't avoid meeting this gaze. She was still feeling this unknown sensation from Christina and was struggling to figure out what it was. "So you're the one who asked me to come here," Eugene spoke up, breaking this short silence. "Why did you tell me to come here? While I did have my own reason for wanting to see you, I didn't expect that you'd be the one to call me over first." "What are your reasons for wanting to see me, Sir Eugene?" Christina asked. "The ones who instigated the plan to kill you and I weren't the Pope and his cardinals," Eugene calmly informed her as if it wasn't a big deal. However, he still made sure that their surroundings were clear. A theocracy like this was absolutely riddled with religious zealots walking around with normal faces. Let alone their god, it wouldn't be strange to be stabbed in the eye if anyone was caught slandering the Pope or the cardinals out on the open streets. "Ah," Christina made a noise of acknowledgement as she nodded lightly. "Indeed, so that was the case. While I had my suspicions in the beginning, I thought they would have no reason to do something like that. So it really was just like that. Do you trust the Pope and the cardinals?" Eugene had asked Christina something like that in the past. He could clearly recall the answer that she had given at that time. But they wouldn't want to have the two of them die from something like this. "I hope you will begin to fully trust me after this incident," Christina earnestly insisted. "I already told you I trusted you," Eugene assured her. "Yes, you did say the same thing to me back then. However, it seemed like you still needed concrete proof rather than just my word. So I was willing to return to the Holy Empire to investigate our suspicions regarding the Pope and Cardinal Rogerus. However, it seems like that didn't accomplish much," Christina admitted with a chuckle as she resumed walking. "In a situation where even our letters are monitored, I made sure to use ciphers and even conveyed my letters to you through one of my few friends. So, Sir Eugene, I hope you appreciate how much effort I put into earning your trust." "I told you that I trust you," Eugene firmly insisted. "I know. I'm saying this because I hope you would be a little more considerate of me and a little more..." Christina trailed off for a few seconds. In that brief moment, Eugene noticed a slight change in Christina's expression. The fake smile disappeared and the smile he had seen on Anise rose in its place. Christina resumed speaking, a little more, although it might sound strange to you, Sir Eugene, but yes, I hope you come to trust and value me just a little more than you already do." "Value you?" Eugene repeated. "Please don't misunderstand me. As the saint, I will surely continue to accompany you on your journey, Sir Eugene. However, I believe that a bond of camaraderie has yet to be forged between you and me. Christina's genuine smile faded away. As such, I need to build our bond step by step. You've got quite the picky personality. In any case, why did you ask me to come all the way to Ura's? Eugene demanded. In a few days on Lady Anisa's birthday, I will be confirmed as the saint, Christina announced. Confirmed. Eugene repeated in confusion. Weren't you already acknowledged as the formal saint instead of just the saint candidate? Only a few are aware of that fact, Christina explained. Even in Ura's, only the Pope and 3 of the cardinals are aware that I have become the formal saint. Now that she mentioned it, the heresy inquisitors belonging to the Malficarum, Atterix and Himoria had also called Christina the saint candidate. Of course, now that I have formally become the saint, it will be an enjoyable and honorable affair to be officially confirmed and announced as such. I will also be receiving blessings and a baptism. However, that also means that on Lady Anisa's feast day, I will be asked to recite a prayer in the Plaza of the Sun and right in front of the statue of Lady Anise at that. Makes me feel like there's a heavy burden weighing down on me. Once that's done, I may be regarded as the second coming of the faithful Lady Anise, Christina said with some self-doubt. Eugene listened to her quietly. However, I have no ability to veto that decision. It's not like I can just reject that arrangement because of the burden it places on me, Christina complained. Are you saying that I'm needed for your confirmation? Eugene asked as he unfurled his cloak. Or could it be that what you really need is the holy sword? The fact that Sir Eugene is the hero won't be revealed, Christina promised. After all, the existence of the hero is a much more weighty affair than the existence of the saint. My confirmation as the saint will take place in one of the deepest, most secretive locations in the Vatican. Sir Eugene would be there. Please watch over me as I am confirmed as the saint, Christina pleaded. But that doesn't really matter, Eugene spoke up as he flourished his cloak outwards. It's a bit petty to be so focused on the fact that your identity as the saint is being announced. What do you mean by that? Christina asked in shock. Not only shouldn't you worry so much about me, but you also don't need to be so overly conscious of the fact that the saintess has to devote herself to aiding the hero, Eugene informed her. Unable to think of a reply to this, Christina's eyes widened in disbelief. Eugene watched as the smile faded from her face and all expression seemed to disappear. You especially need to stop saying that you will die in my stead, Eugene instructed. Although it was strange for him to be saying something like that considering how he died in his past life. I really hate those kinds of words, Eugene spat out. But it was because he had died like that Eugene, more than anyone else in this world, felt he was qualified to say such a thing. Chapter 183, Eurasia 2. It felt like her heart was being peeled open. Although the heart beating in her chest right now didn't actually have a shell to peel away, Christina couldn't help but feel that way. Her very core, which she had never wanted to show anyone, and the surface of her emotions, which even she couldn't clearly grasp, felt like they were being rifled through by Eugene. As such, she couldn't stop her control over her expressions from faltering. It was extremely brief, but that momentary loss of control felt like it had lasted for a lot longer to Christina. What kind of expression did I just show? Christina asked herself. She wasn't sure. It didn't feel like she had been smiling. Christina unconsciously raised her hands to caress her cheeks. She touched the smile that she had always kept on her face and had started to take for granted. It was different from my current expression, but I'm not sure what it was, Christina continued to ruminate. The Pope was elected from a selection of priests who held the strongest faiths in all of this expansive Holy Empire. After the previous Pope received his final rites and before his soul rose to heaven, the Pope's soul would appear in the dreams of all the Church's bishops. In this way, the Pope would look into the souls of all the bishops, examining their faith, and then he would select his potential successors by engraving a stigmata onto the bodies of those bishops who possessed sufficient faith. The bishops who were marked by this stigmata would enter the audience chamber, deep within the Vatican, and one among them would be chosen by the light. The chosen bishop would then become the Pope, while the bishops who were not chosen would become his cardinals. The current Pope of Ura's, Aurius, was also chosen by the light within that audience chamber 30 years ago. The Pope selected through this process was considered in Ura's to be the emissary of the light. Saints were different from the popes and the cardinals. While the latter two were chosen from among the bishops for their piety, the saintess was bestowed by the light. In this generation, Christina may have been the only candidate for sainthood, but in the previous generations, there were usually 3 or 4 candidates for the next saint. The blessing of the light, the process by which saint candidates were selected, required certain conditions. They had to be a girl raised in a monastery, someone who had been orphaned or abandoned. Among those girls who fit this background, some would suddenly start to radiate light, and even as children, they would be able to perform miracles that were incredibly powerful. If the blessing of the light that was bestowed upon each of these girls gradually diminished as a candidate grew older, this meant that they had been disqualified as a candidate. Among these candidates, the one whose light shone even more brilliantly rather than diminishing would be officially recognized as a saint. It was through this method that the saintess became an apostle of the light. The hero. Long, long ago, back when the demon kings didn't even exist and the boundaries between demon folk, demonic beasts, and monsters hadn't even been established, the god of light descended from the heavens and created a sword from his own flesh and blood to illuminate the darkness. That sword was the holy sword Altair, the first child of the god of light, the most brilliant torch that the god left behind for the sake of the world. After the god left the earth once more and ascended to the heavens as a ray of light, no one in the Holy Empire would prove able to pull out Altair and reveal its light. Only the great Vermouth from 300 years ago and his descendant Eugene Lionheart had ever managed to draw Altair and draw upon its light. It was for this reason that heroes were special. Heroes were neither an emissary of the light nor an apostle. They were an incarnation of the light. So what was so strange about a saintess sacrificing herself for the hero? It was only natural for her to do so. Christina believed in this truth without a doubt. So if a situation arose where it became necessary to do so, and if Christina was the saint at that time, she would be willing to give her life for the sake of the hero, for the sake of Eugene. Ever since the day she had become a saint candidate, that was how Christina had been taught. How noble and glorious the duty of the saint was had been engraved into her heart. The face she had been born with, the fact that she was selected by the cardinal, and the blessing that was bestowed upon her. She had worked hard to become a saint worthy of these gifts. She had worked hard so that she could step forward into her role as the second coming of the faithful Anise from 300 years ago. The curves of the corners of her mouth, the position of the corners of her lips, the rise and fall of her voice, the direction of her gaze, and the way she smiled with her eyes. She had practiced such expressions repeatedly while hiding all her inner thoughts and feelings. Christina had been taught that things that didn't need to be revealed shouldn't be revealed. So for Eugene to tell her that being a saint didn't mean that she should be willing to sacrifice herself for the hero made her question whether he still didn't want to admit that he was the hero? But then what about me? Christina asked herself. No matter the era, the saint could always be found in Eurus. But what was so special about Christina was that, just like the faithful Anise from 300 years ago, she had found herself living in the same era as the hero. Just like Anise, Christina hoped that she would be able to fulfill her duties alongside the hero. She felt that being born with an appearance similar to Lady Anise's and having the hero be born to the Lionheart family once more were all a part of fate's design. However, if Eugene were to refuse his role as the hero and refuse to fulfill his duty, then would there be any meaning to how she had lived to be acknowledged as the saint? That ring. A thought that she didn't want to pay any attention to, that she shouldn't pay any attention to, kept popping up in front of her eyes and rolling around inside her head. Christina recalled how she had held Eugene's hands earlier. On the ring finger of his left hand, Eugene was now wearing a gold ring that he hadn't worn when they were together in Samar. Christina was also well aware of what wearing a ring on one's left ring finger meant. Such a ring was an item that the saintess, a companion of the light who was to remain pure for the rest of her life, would never have anything to do with. Have 3 whole months really gone by so quickly? During that time, after all, nobles do often get engaged even before they become adults. Furthermore, Eugene had been evaluated as the best talent that had ever been seen in the prestigious Lionheart clan since the founding ancestor. From Christina's point of view, Eugene's personality had some serious flaws, and his mouth was as dirty as a filthy rag, but his appearance was so outstanding that even she couldn't help but recognize it. As for his skills, was there any need to even bring them up? If she had to find some kind of flaw, it would be that Eugene was a foster child, not someone from the main line, and that he had already given up the right to succeed as the next patriarch. But considering everything that Eugene had to offer, any number of aristocratic families must be willing to arrange a marriage with him no matter what flaws he might have. Eugene was only 20 years old. An age that would be considered not just on the younger side but the very younger side. Even if he couldn't become the patriarch of the prestigious Lionheart clan, this young Eugene Lionheart had the potential to become anything that he wanted to be. A Tower Master of Arath? The commander of Aratha's Court Wizards Division? He could even become a commander of Kiel's Imperial Knights or swear allegiance to a completely different country. Who could the other party be? A high-ranking noble on the same level as the Lionheart clan. They might even be royalty. This wasn't something that Christina should care so much about. But although she tried to tell herself that her heart wasn't following her orders. But wasn't that ring too modest for an engagement ring? In engagements between high-ranking nobility, it should be common for the engaged to wear expensive rings, both to commemorate the event and show off to other noble families. Christina wanted to take another look at it to confirm her suspicions, but she suppressed the urge to do so. Such an impulse was unnecessary. There was no need for her to do so. She didn't want to feel any more unneeded confusion and was worried about potentially meeting Eugene's eyes. As such, Christina just kept walking quickly. Without asking the reason for the sudden rise in pace, Eugene also just kept walking behind her. Then when Eugene suddenly turned around, he spotted Mare, who was diligently trying to catch up to them with her short gait. "So, Sir Eugene, you are finally paying attention to me," Mare spat angrily. Eugene held his cloak open with an awkward expression, and Mare quickly dived into the cape as if she had just been waiting for the opportunity. "This will be my first time riding a train. Have you ever ridden one before?" Mare asked excitedly. "This will be my first time riding one as well," Eugene admitted. There wasn't anything like a train around 300 years ago. There were trains in Kiel as well. While it was common for nobles to use warp gates for long-distance travel, ordinary people who couldn't afford the high cost of doing so would use trains when they needed to travel long distances. Because the internal machinery of trains was mainly composed of magitech, they hadn't completely replaced horses and carriages yet. However, since trains could run anywhere as long as rails were laid and they were overwhelmingly easier to maintain than warp gates with far less risk of accidents, the introduction of magic trains and the creation of new train routes were slowly spreading. With this increase in demand came a corresponding rise in technological developments. According to Melkith, the alchemists of the White Tower of Magic were recently working on a magic car that would be able to drive on the roads in place of horses and carriages. "It's funny how they're being so blatant," Mare giggled as she lay comfortably inside the cloak. Befitting of an empire, the Holy Empire of Euras had a wide land mass, and the penetration rate of the warp gates was very low. Divine magic, which was derived from faith, and normal magic, which made use of mana, had completely different systems. The high-browed and high-ranking priests of Euras disapproved of wizards who could perform miraculous acts without even a hint of faith, and there had been a long discrimination against wizards in Euras. Of course, that was all in the distant past. After the war with the Demon Kings, the world had changed so much that even black wizards were publicly accepted into magical society. Though in fact, rather than the reason that times had changed, it was more likely because they could no longer ignore the fact that, in many ways, most magic was more convenient than divine magic. After all, it's not like all believers can use divine magic, Christina sighed regretfully. Although the same goes for normal magic, unlike divine magic, ordinary magic can also benefit non-wizards. As long as they have the money for it, that is. Ordinary people without the ability to fly in the sky could use one of Aratha's aerial carriages as long as they had the money for it. Long distances that would require days of travel by horse and carriage or by train could be crossed in an instant through the use of a warp gate if you just had the money for it. Even in the cold, snowy winter, if you could pay the price for one, you could install a magic boiler and use hot water to your heart's content. It was also thanks to the magic that the current Eugene didn't have to carry around a heavy money pouch and identity badge. He had a magical identity card linked to his blood and a magic debit card connected to his bank, which meant he didn't have to carry any cash with him. All this was the result of the daily life magic being spread and developed by Arath, the kingdom of magic. While there were miracles designed solely for convenience even in divine magic, unlike ordinary magic that could be sustained by the mana in the air or by mana batteries created through alchemy, such miracles were far less enduring. In addition, divine magic used the imprecise power of faith rather than mana, so the level and power of a holy spell all depended on the level of the caster's faith. Euros is one of the richest countries in the entire continent. They probably have more wealth accumulated in their treasury than Kiel does, right? Mare asked in confirmation. Probably, Eugene agreed. Apart from their taxes, the people of this country even have to pay tithes to the churches they attend. These tithes are sent up from the churches to the Vatican, and on top of that, they even receive the money collected from churches in other nations. Even though they have so much money, the penetration rate of warp gates is much lower than in Kiel. The current Kiel even has warp gates installed in your hometown Jadal, and even in a place that stinks of cow dung like Bolaño, Mare pointed out. Although warp gates had been installed there, they didn't see much use. Such warp gates were only used by nobles or the wealthy who went down to the countryside to recover their health. The commoners living in such rural areas saw more use in horses and carriages or trains. This country is obviously brainwashing its subjects. Don't indulge in the comfort of magic and don't go too far from home, so if they are free, then they have no choice but to go down to their local church. But even while creating such an environment for their subjects, the high-ranking priests will probably use a hidden set of warp gates, right? Mare remarked cynically. Do such plots come up in the novels you've been reading these past few days? Eugene asked. How did you know? Even though Eurus's name isn't specifically mentioned, anyone would be reminded of Eurus when they read about a theocracy like it. In that novel, the high priest is shown to revel in the depths of their city's underworld. Mare chattered in an excited tone that had Eugene tapping his fingers thoughtfully. I'm sure the high-ranking priests of Eurus must do the same thing. How can a person live so stoically when they have a large amount of money and power? While pretending to be ascetic on the surface, they must surely be indulging in pleasures when on their own and living a comfortable life. It feels like it would be better if you didn't say such things to Christina, Eugene reminded Mare. I'm also tactful enough not to do something like that, you know? But Sir Eugene, isn't it quite strange? What is? I resemble Lady Sienna because she made me into a familiar based on her childhood appearance. But Lady Anise wasn't a wizard, right? Mare asked doubtfully. Christina isn't a familiar, Eugene corrected her. She's probably a distant descendant of Anise. Christina probably wasn't just an ordinary descendant. Eugene recalled how Anise had risen from Christina's back while unfolding her 8 wings. The blessing of light that was bestowed upon the saint candidates. Perhaps it had some connection to Anise, allowing her to dwell within the body of her descendants. Is that so? Mare muttered as she tilted her head to the side. Even so, Mare still felt like there was something indescribable about Christina. How long does it take to reach Trescia Parish by train? Eugene asked, breaking the silence. Unless an accident occurs mid-journey, we should arrive there by midnight, Christina replied. Trescia Parish was the home of Cardinal Rogerus. Although Eugene felt like it would only be natural for the parish of a high-ranking priest at the level of a cardinal to have a warp gate, neither Cardinal Rogerus nor any other cardinal had installed warp gates within their parish. It wasn't just the cardinals either. Among the many ancient holy sites and other historical sites within Eurus, it was actually rare to find any with a warp gate installed nearby. It is because the meaning of a pilgrimage will only be lightened if one can easily come and go through a warp gate, Christina replied softly as she assuaged Eugene's complaints. A pilgrimage, as a rule, requires a certain amount of hardship. It's only natural for a person to not want to do difficult and cumbersome things, especially when their bodies are tired. Overcoming such hardships, pilgrims will continue to wander and visit other holy sites for a long time. It is only when they manage to overcome their desires with their faith like this that it can be called a true pilgrimage. So when you insisted on wearing your priestly robes in that sweltering, muddy jungle, it was something like a pilgrimage for you? Eugene asked thoughtfully. So you finally realized. Christina celebrated excitedly. But you didn't really manage to overcome your desires, did you? Eugene continued asking. You washed your clothes as soon as they got dirty. You also ate a lot. Meals have nothing to do with a pilgrimage. And what does wanting to keep your priestly robes clean have anything to do with my desires? Refusing to turn around and look at Eugene, Christina continued speaking. I'm also aware of how convenient warp gates are. However, when you pursue the comfort of the body, the mind becomes lazy. especially in Trescia Parish or the other parishes governed by the cardinals, which are regularly visited by the faithful of other parishes who come to offer their prayers. Is that so? Yes, that is indeed the case. Once a month, the cardinals will personally appear in their churches and preside over a service. On such a day, the train stations will be full of believers from other parishes who want to attend their service. And if they get there too late, they won't even be able to purchase a ticket. Do you know what that means? No. I can't really say for sure, Eugene admitted. It means they won't be able to participate in the service without moving faster than the others. Yet even so, some ardent believers will refuse to take the train and walk there on foot. It is faith that allows them to choose to perform such self-mortification, Christina declared passionately. Starting in his previous life, Eugene had never had much time for faith. As such, he couldn't understand why they would put their bodies under such torment for a pilgrimage that would only lead them to pray at a different location. Christina tried to explain, "You also sweat a lot while training, so you must also feel pain during that practice, right?" "That's right," Eugene hesitantly agreed. "Just like how the blood and sweat you have shed has made you stronger, the hardships of the pilgrimage makes the believer's faith stronger than before," Christina argued. "All right," Eugene slowly agreed. Eugene had felt a sense of incongruity coming from Christina's expression, but he hadn't felt anything during their conversation just now. Although her logic seemed to be based on her individual arbitrary beliefs, Eugene felt happy seeing Christina express herself. Christina changed the subject. "Sir Eugene, have you ever ridden a train before?" "Nope," came the short reply. "Once you ride it, I'm sure you'll love it. Unlike a warp gate that's over in a few steps or a shaking carriage, trains are both comfortable and tasteful," Kristen said as she came to a halt. She slowly raised one hand and pointed at the stopped train. "That is Euras's pilgrimage train. Also known as the Sunnyside Anise train." "What?" Eugene made a confused sound. "It's the Sunnyside Anise train," Christina repeated. Eugene turned his wavering eyes to the front of the train. Like the figurehead at the bow of a ship, the face of the locomotive at the front of the train was adorned with the figure of an angel praying with her eyes closed. Upon closer inspection, the decoration was a miniature version of the statue of Anise that they had seen in the Plaza of the Sun. "Why is Lady Anice's name included in the name of the train?" Eugene eventually asked. "It isn't just Lady Anise," Christina explained. "All other pilgrimage trains that travel from parish to parish bear the names of the saints." "Couldn't that be called a type of blasphemy?" Eugene considered this question seriously. Although he hadn't left any descendants, if he had and those descendants went on to build a train and name it the Sunnyside Hamel train, then he felt like he would definitely leap out of his grave and grab his descendants by the throat. "Ha!" Mare, who was sticking her head out of the cloak for a better view, let out a laugh. She couldn't keep a straight face. Mare wasn't laughing because she thought the Sunnyside Anise train was funny. Instead, it was all because of what Christina had said earlier. In fact, Eugene would have felt the same as Mare had he not been distracted by the name. Even though Christina had said so much on the subject of not installing warp gates to not get intoxicated by the comforts of magic and to not tarnish the meaning of the pilgrimage, the train in front of them was the crystallization of magic engineering with all kinds of magic incorporated into its construction. The train was fueled by a large number of mana batteries that had been created through alchemy. Judging by the amount of output Eugene could sense, there was no doubt that the batteries were state-of-the-art. All sorts of magic had been incorporated into its design to reduce the train's weight, increase its speed, suppress vibrations, and secure its stability. "Our tickets have already been prepared for us, so let's board now," Christina proposed as she took the lead and headed up into the train. "Well, it certainly looks spacious and comfortable. But it would be hundreds of times easier just to use a warp gate than to try and compromise like this," Mare critiqued, her head still stuck outside of the cloak and bobbing here and there as she examined the inside of the train. The seats reserved for them were in the special class. Muttered prayers and hymns flowed over from the general class seats in the carriages behind the special class. But once they opened the door and went inside, such miscellaneous noises could no longer be heard. "The train has a different charm to it than the warp gates, little Miss Familiar," Christina said with a smile. While striding through the secluded and luxurious interior to approach their assigned seats, she continued, "It's especially peaceful and enjoyable to sit by the window and watch the scenery pass by so swiftly." "The windows?" Mare immediately showed interest. She put aside her disinterested expression and claimed a seat by the window for herself with sparkling eyes. I'll sit here. As you like, Eugene casually agreed. Since all the luggage he had brought with him could be stored inside his cloak, Eugene had no need to store any luggage separately. Eugene sat down on the wide, soft seat next to Mare and looked up at Christina to ask, "Why aren't you taking a seat?" "Oh," Christina responded hesitantly and turned her head away from Eugene. When she tried to take a different seat a short distance away, Eugene grabbed Christina's wrist with a puzzled look. "Where are you going?" Eugene demanded. Christina blurted out, "Huh. You can just sit across from me," Eugene pointed out exasperatedly. He didn't understand why Christina wanted to sit at a different seat when they had already picked a spot with 4 seats facing each other. "Sir Eugene," Mare exclaimed, "if you press this button and lean backward, the chair tilts back." Yes, Eugene replied absently. "I checked before we came here, but I was told that a sales trolley regularly goes up and down the train. They sell snacks like sweets and candies, and they even sell lunch boxes. Would you like to try one as well?" Mare asked. Fine, Eugene responded in a dry tone as he opened a magazine placed next to his chair. It was no different from a similar one he had seen in Arath, which had listed all the tourist attractions available in the country, but this magazine focused on the holy sites of Uruz. They even offered a train pilgrimage package that would take up an entire month. Churches specializing in educating non-believers were also listed separately, and prayers to the light and scripture verses were written on the back page. "How enthusiastic," Eugene muttered as he lifted his gaze to Christina. However, their eyes didn't meet. Christina had lowered her eyes slightly, staring down at Eugene's fingers. "Do people even buy this pilgrimage package?" Eugene asked skeptically. "It's very popular with the elderly from foreign countries," Christina informed him. "Really now? So it's meant to attract the kind of people who want to obtain a ticket to heaven at a late age," Eugene observed. "While I can't say that their faith is pure, that doesn't mean you have the right to think lightly of their faith, Sir Eugene," Christina indignantly argued. "Did I make you mad?" "Not at all. I'm not angry in the slightest. Because I know full well that you are a young master from a noble clan, as well as someone so rude and mischievous that it's hard to believe that you are the hero. But you seem like you're mad. What reason would I have for being angry with you? In the first place, I, as the saint, can't rightly do such a thing towards the hero. Compared to a few months ago, you've regressed back to how a saint is supposed to speak to the hero," Eugene pointed out with a smirk as he closed the magazine. "Could it be that you feel like there's a need for you to do so?" "What do you mean by that?" Christina asked in denial. "It doesn't seem like you want to talk like this," Eugene observed. "Why don't you just admit that it feels shitty and stop? Or could it be that it doesn't feel shitty to you? Please pay attention to your behavior. Such a demeanor will make a person like you feel low class," Christina warned. "Hamel, it's not just your posture that's bad. Your demeanor as a whole is just awful. It's low class." Eugene rejected her request. "I don't care if I give off that feeling. While correcting your manners is important, as long as you can keep your mouth shut for now, people won't be able to tell what a filthy rag you have for a tongue. Rather than forcing myself to do something that doesn't really suit me, it's easier and more comfortable to just do what I want to do," Eugene said with a grin as he rested his chin on one hand. "But it seems you don't know how to do that?" "I don't even want to know," Christina sniffed. "So what, until when are you going to keep your eyes lowered like that? What's the problem?" Eugene inquired. Christina stayed silent. "Are you curious?" Eugene asked. He was finding it fun to tease her. It reminded him of the humiliation he had felt in Samar when he was pulled onto Christina's back and held up by his hips. About this ring, that is. Eugene had already felt that her gaze was focused on this ring.